Tried to walk in from out of frame. Did it look cool? I know it didn't. What's up, guys? It's Ricky Cecchini, the VP of Product here at CloudRadial. And I'm going to share my screen so we can talk about the stuff you're here to talk about. It's a pretty lengthy subject, so I'm not going to do my usual stuff and filibuster my own webinar. I think we're going to get right into, hopefully, while you guys are here, try to get you some knowledge of a lot of it's what I've personally learned, and a lot more of it is what we've seen as a company. So really what we're focusing on today is, yes, of course, how to assess an MSP's AI readiness. And we're going to be looking at it through a couple of different lenses. The first one, I think, primarily is going to be a generalization of AI tools. Obviously, I don't know all the different AI tools that an MSP could implement, but the general framework to approach them from speaking to other product people, from speaking to other MSPs, it generally seems to be about the same methodology. And then we're going to focus into what probably most of you are approaching when it comes to AI, which is typically a service desk implementation for AI. So all that and more, and let's get right into it, shall we? So um, I don't know if I'm sharing, Crystal. I'm going to ask you just because I'm insecure. Can you see my screen? Just making sure. Maybe. I see myself. There it is. I see a screen. Hopefully you guys see that too. And if not, hear my voice. All right, so what are we covering specifically? So when we're looking at this AI readiness stuff, we're kind of looking at it in four pillars with some subpoints beneath. And we're talking about, again, evaluating the tech stack specifically. So how you actually know if you are ready for AI. If you're already ready for AI, basically how do the tools interconnect and what's the pitfalls to avoid. That's going to kind of come hand in hand with number two, which is the AI adoption issues that I've seen, how to overcome them, kind of things to watch out for. Again, practical tools to benchmark AI readiness between you and me and you guys. That's the plug for the CloudRadial stuff. Hopefully, again, short of just being like a CloudRadial plug, it also kind of shows you a methodology in which you might want to approach other tools. You can totally steal ours even without Service AI, but we're going to talk about how we approached it for service. And then lastly, we're going to tie it all together, basically saying, okay, so with the pitfalls, with the capabilities, how do you really take a holistic look at an AI strategy and go, is it a gimmick? Is it a foundational piece? Is it just another tool? Where do you kind of layer it in and how does it all kind of work together? All that and more. I'm looking forward to finding out, just like you guys are. Let's see. So I spoiled the slide, but do MSPs even really struggle with AI? Yes. Now I'll say that with I should have put an asterisk because there are plenty of MSPs that are out here doing AI work, but the reality is that the large majority of you guys already have used AI and you're already kind of aware of how it works and the pitfalls of it. So when I see struggles, or when I'm really talking about when I say struggles, I'm talking about finding the strategic implementation of AI. So most of the time that I've seen struggles is because people are taking AI and trying to implement a piece of it into a tool or a process instead of creating a system around it. So it really is just kind of like trying to chuck a calculator at a mathematician and going, do better math. It's like you can if you know why you're using that calculator, right? AI, as far as I understand, as far as I've seen until I am proved wrong, still appears to just be a tool to enhance, and it certainly is not a replacer. And it's not something that is going to magically fix processes. It can suggest improvements, but it can't actually do that outright. So, with that framing in mind, we're going to specifically get a clear picture of like how you figure out where you stand and what you want to do about it. So, starting with the first one, right? Let's kind of take a look at the evaluation of how you actually understand if AI is a good fit and where you kind of begin with it. So, I strongly urge, and again, I know my market, I know who I'm talking to, that most of you guys already have done this and you already are pretty aware of it, but you really want to play around with AI as a whole, right? And I talk about this a lot, even in Service AI when I do implementations for CloudRadial, because the reality is there's no vendor out there in the MSP space that has any kind of secret trick. AI is kind of what it is. Now, there are clever implementations, but the pitfalls of your Chat GPTs, your Claudes, your Geminis, or whatever, there are benefits and downsides to some of them, but more or less it behaves the same way. So just having that core understanding, even if you've just messed with it, is going to help you really understand, again, the limitations and where it fits. So when we look at the stack and looking at how it can actually fit out and be useful to you, we're kind of looking at three different kind of sub pillars here when you look at the value of AI. So number one is your PSA integration capability. Most of you, if not all of you, are using some kind of a ticketing system, if not professional service automation, right? PSA system. And we're specifically talking about how, grabbable is that data. So if I asked you to, provide 6 months of data with full notes, is that hard? Is that a nightmare? Is that easy? Is that some API call? Some of the PSAs we see out there make that trivial. Sometimes it's really, really easy. You get the data when you ask for it, and that's it. Sometimes you have to pay for API access. Different systems handle it differently. So this isn't just AI, hooks into stuff. It's really saying what systems do you have in place, and then do you really want to understand like where do those systems allow you to grab that data? And we see it again. This is drawing from our personal experience when we built out Service AI and we were looking into it. Our primary product, CloudRadial UCP or the client portal, was built on the APIs of these PSA systems. So we know the limits of what's pullable, but we're not just talking about PSAs, right? We're talking about different tools you have. So the reality is, when you take a good hard look at your tool set, we're talking about can all the tools export and import data nicely? Because that's what you're kind of sticking that tool layer on top of and making sure the transference goes back and forth. So kind of my own head canon of things to look out for as you kind of identify. We'll stick to the PSA, but you can certainly apply this to other tools. Is again API access without like per call limits, because that can get pretty sketchy if you're having to pay per call and the API is doing a lot of work with AI, can really balloon your costs. Again, if we're talking about service, the ticket notes and the details of the ticket, so like metadata is nice, headers are nice, but we're talking about like as much as you can get, because the more you can crawl, the more valuable it is. Obviously, historical data like time and point is useful for specific operations, but if you're trying to get some analytics, you're trying to make some improvements, and you want to see trends, which is what a lot of MSPs like to see, you're going to want to make sure that that API supports a good amount of historical data. And then obviously, like user and contact information is really valuable. So when we look at AI as an implementation, especially when it relates to service, we're talking about insights, we're talking about trend analysis, we're talking about ability to correct things so that can the AI actually get in there and manipulate the API, right? Those are the key things you're looking for. I know it says PSA on screen, but really with any tool you have. So there is just the minimal amount of due diligence you can do just looking into these tools, or at least asking your vendors to make sure that your tools support these things so you have the capability of putting AI in there if and when you want to, right? When we talk about the second piece of automation maturity, what am I talking about? Basically, it means where are you with automation today? Again, I work with MSPs of all different sizes, and size means basically nothing when it comes to maturity of automation, because I've worked with one-man shops that are like Einstein level, that have done automation at the enterprise capacity with, again, one or two people. And I've worked with enterprise companies that are just now getting into it. So size, you probably know, is not a correlation of, the maturity, but generally speaking, my, again, headcanon is level like zero is like we have a system, a database, a PSA, and that's it. We operate in it, right? All the way down to like let's go to like level one or two is like we have some ticket routing rules. Maybe we use some scripting or RMM stuff. And like the more advanced one is we're already using some AI or machine learning, even if it's basic to manipulate calls. And the cool thing about our space is that a lot of our vendors in the general ecosystem are facilitating that, right? So again, I'll shout out to a friend of the ours, like TimeZest, right? Scheduling tool. I know they're already integrated in and they already have like built-in stuff inside of the PSA, but like the ability to go in and manipulate, and look at scheduling and assignments and whatnot starts to make it a lot more powerful, because they can go in and again look at the availability, look at the hours, look at the burden rate, and that starts to be really interesting because that's something that would be ordinarily super time intensive. So that's where you start to get into, you take a look at a vendor, you take a look at their capabilities, you take a look at your systems, can they speak together? In general, the last integration point between systems is not the easiest thing to kind of map out yourself, but the gist is MSPs we work with usually have like 8 to 15 tools, like a minimum, right? And there's a lot more out there, but the goal isn't trying to make an insane, correlation between each one, because that can be a lot, especially if you're just starting to get into AI and figuring out how it can help. Really, the easiest exercise that I've found is to basically try to draw the general points of your ecosystem, like on a piece of paper, right? So you have your PSA, maybe your RMM, maybe a backup tool, maybe security tools, whatever, and just going like which ones are available and open, and basically which ones share data between each other, and take a look at that. Just without even AI stuff, just take a look at that sheer spider web of connectivity. And the reality is that the tool that has the most lines coming in and out of it is the one that you want to prioritize AI deployment to, because the fewer things you have AI touching, the easier you're going to have a time of managing it and using it. So that's why, again, we do this. A lot of MSP vendor tools do this. We really kind of center around the PSA because the PSA kind of is a natural habitat for a lot of those connections, right? But again, it doesn't have to be PSA related. You can kind of do this all over the map depending on the tool you're looking at. You don't really need the perfect integration, the perfect path. You just need to identify the viable things in your stack that can be AI-able, right? That's where you just start. If you're just starting the conversation of, I don't know much about how I can start to get AI, just start looking at where you might want to put it and what it can do. That brings us to my second point here, which is our service data infrastructure. And I promise that just to be a little bit more relevant, I'll keep it a little bit more focused on service just because that's what I know. But here's how we kind of look at that, right? So to set the stage a little bit, when we look at AI and service, most people again are looking for trying to summarize the basically the history and the work that they've done and make it easier for present and future techs to use that data to give better answers, to resolve things quicker, maybe to even resolve things outright. That's the dream, right? But when you look at that, you have to be honest and serious about looking at your data and kind of assessing how your data is structured. So we did the first exercise. We kind of identified that the PSA is a good source of, automation because it has that input output stuff. Now, what's the data in that PSA look like? So here's what we do on the back end, and here's how I would invite you to look at it as well. If you read the last 15, 20 tickets that your techs have closed, that you have closed, the way we look at it is, AI is this awesome system. It's an awesome tool, but it's really no different than a newbie. And if you put a new guy on a ticket and they were to just read the notes, could they understand what happened? Could they understand how the issue was fixed, resolved, whatever? If the answer is no, or yeah, but they would have to go to another, then the AI is not going to understand it either, right? Because it is literally understanding like a person looking behind your shoulder. So even when we look at that stuff, the quality of the ticket notes is a primary driver of the integrity of your data. So you've got the public facing notes, which I know we've talked about kind of ad nauseum internally. And those are the ones that we tend to look at because we also want to be cognizant that that's also the client experience. If you didn't know, CloudRadial is really big on client stuff, which means that if your public facing notes are really sloppy, but your internal notes are awesome, that's cool, but the client only sees the slop, right? And the AI typically only reads the slop. Now, it can read the internal in some cases, but the gist is it learns from what's written, it improves from what's written, not what the technician meant or the good intentions or just the drop off of like, yeah, we fixed this. And that's what I see a lot of in the field. So as you analyze stuff to really understand your readiness, looking at the quality of like your base unit of what AI is going to look at. And AI is going to look at time entries and notes and again, categories and subcategories, trying to do this stuff. If it's kind of garbage in, promise you it's going to be garbage out. I'll talk about this a little bit later about how we kind of objectively look at it. And again, it's not a proprietary system. You're welcome to apply that in different ways, but I think it helps. The second piece is a really big one I run into as well. So when a lot of people talk about service data infrastructure, it goes hand in hand. You've got the ticket data, and then you've got the other sum of knowledge that a technician might go into to understand how to fix a ticket or pass that knowledge on to other people, right? If you're not familiar with it, developers are super famous for the bus test. It applies to technicians as well. The bus test is, if you've never seen it, if you get hit by a bus and let's just say you won't die, but you're in the hospital for a hot minute. can anyone figure out what was going on, what you were working on, what you were working from, your process and everything? If the answer is no, that's a bad gap, right? So the knowledge-based completeness is interesting because basically every MSP I've worked with has a knowledge base. But the question of if they put graveyard articles from 2019 in there is a different question. The answer is it's kind of all over the place. That's almost, if not as important as the service desk ticket data, because outdated docs are almost worse than no docs in an AI standard because they pollute the waters, right? An AI system, especially in service desk, is going to look at the ticket notes. It's going to look at your documentation. So if it's just got a bunch of crap, it's like, again, taking a new guy, sitting them down, and then just saying garbage to them for 5 hours and then asking them questions. They're going to have all that garbage in their head, not going to spit out the most useful answer. So the gap test that we kind of look at internally too is kind of looking at like, here's a way we've seen it for MSPs. If you look at like, say, the last 10 or so ticket types in your PSA, is there a KB article or any kind of adjacent KB article that answers that? And the reality is most people have super specific documents, right? I have client A and I have a network diagram for them. Cool. Are there documents or any kind of, really it is documentation. Is there any documentation on the proprietary processes, or does it exist in so-and-so senior technician's head because, oh, he's worked with that client forever? That's a problem, right? It may not be a problem for the immediate future, but the buzz test shows that's a problem. And the AI, again, isn't magic. It's not going to magically figure out proprietary answers, especially when it's not issues like Microsoft 365 or an HP printer. If it's proprietary stuff, that knowledge-based completeness is massive for AI infrastructure integrity, right? So knowledge base is super, super, super important. There are ways to discover gaps in the knowledge base, but just be cognizant that as you look at AI readiness, it's not just about can AI hook into it, it's what are you using to feed context to that AI. And again, knowledge bases, IT Glue is awesome, Hoodoo is awesome. Basically, anywhere you can pull that documentation is a good way to just store it and enrich the AI. And lastly, the consistency, right? The consistency is just saying, it kind of beats volume. It doesn't matter if you have a billion different articles. If they're formatted poorly or they're just one line of text, it's not super effective. So making documentation a habit rather than a chore is really important, just because if technicians are only writing documentations when they're forced, you're going to find out really quickly how fast your AI has holes in knowledge. And the other thing that I see a lot is AI loves hallucinations, because if you guys don't know this, by definition, by default, you can't out-train this. AI is designed to always give you an answer, even if it has no idea, which is how hallucinations happen. That's how you put an answer or question in. It doesn't know. It has to look confident because it is literally designed to keep looking confident, to make you feel good about the answer, and to keep you coming back and using it, which means that if you have gaps, AI doesn't care. It'll continue to lie to you. So you have to be aware, and we're going to get into this in a second, how to spot those gaps and how to say, that's a hallucination, that's a lie, we have a gap. And what do you do to address that? So proactively looking at this before diving in is a good idea. It'll give you a nice sense of kind of the integrity of stuff. Let's dive into the third kind of pillar of how we're looking at things. So team capabilities, this one's a super quick one. I think this is just, we have to be honest with ourselves. This is true of basically any software or any kind of new tool or process in general, but I'm going to spin it for the AI, basis. The technical skills baseline, I'm talking to MSPs here. I'm just saying, have you used AI? Are you kind of generally aware? Meaning, like, does your team know to copy paste an AI response, look at it and edit it if it has garbage or it looks too fake? That's all we're talking about. A lot of, techs already do this. Everybody knows that, for the longest time and still today, like the tier one technicians are the best at Googling stuff, scraping out the irrelevant stuff and pasting in the answer, which is awesome. And AI is like a faster way of doing that. So again, we're just looking for the baseline of skill is being able to recognize truth from hallucination, just kind of being able to scrape it out. It's a good idea to identify an AI trainer. So when I look at AI, as we kind of look at holistic deployments for people and people are getting into it, the best person to stick on these systems and try to figure out if it's speaking truth or hallucinating is not a junior because they might not know the difference. It's probably like a more senior level technician. Now, the senior level technicians that are interpreting AI answers and AI processes likely aren't going to get the most benefits out of them. And that's what I've seen in my deployments. They're going to get a little bit of friction because they're working on something that isn't super helpful to them and it feels almost useless. But remember, the first level of AI, especially for service, is for the juniors. It's to summarize answers, it's to help them get um, the appropriate processes to make sure they don't have gaps in documentation. And only a senior technician would be able to call out whether that is an appropriate fix or process or if there's a hole in documentation. So yes, we want people, especially as you look at your team, that can identify those things and scrape it out. But you really want people that can call it out and kind of clean the data for those that come after. Openness to change. Oops, I'm freaking out my mouse wheel. Let's go. Openness to change. So again, just like any other tool, AI is scary. I don't know if you guys have known that, and especially a lot of, more junior level people keep getting fear-mongered. I see it everywhere of AI as the great replacer, or AI as something that's coming to take jobs and people or stopping hire. And I don't know, right? At the end of the day, nobody really knows where it's going to end up. All I know for sure is that where it stands right now, it's not replacing anybody. So openness to change is basically being open and being aware as a team that you're going to have to change processes slightly, aka writing better notes or being more mindful of the documentation. It doesn't mean you have to literally babysit AI, but it means the openness to understand how AI is interpreting it and not hoping AI just meets you. I think there's going to have to be, from what I've seen, a meeting in the middle of standards. AI will improve, but there are certain things that AI will not be able to fix. Can't fix missing knowledge. It can't make your notes better. It can just try to interpret what you've done and offer suggestions, right? Resistance usually comes from what I've seen from the best technicians because they've got the expertise. They're afraid or hesitant to being replaced, so they don't want to dump it into something that eventually goes, I know what you know, because then it feels like they're going to get outed, right? The reality is that again, like a calculator not replacing a mathematician, it's really not there. It's not something that can do it, and it really is something that can pass the bus test. So someone still needs to operate it, but it's a fear worth addressing and worth kind of getting into. So as a team, talking about that openness to change is really important and kind of understanding the adoption and the purpose and not just saying, who knows what AI will do? It'll get us somewhere. Same kind of concept for championing it. And fundamentally, techs who write good notes are really ending up training the AI, whether they know it or not. And techs who don't are really creating the blind spots. So AI is going to really help make that bad documentation visible, and you'll know pretty quick. And I'll show examples of it, or at least you can get examples, especially on demos. If you ask it stuff that you don't have well documented, you'll see pretty quickly that it has no idea what it's talking about. And that's something that you have to correct. All right, last but not least, as far as kind of that understanding your four pillars. So before I get into this, remember, can the stack do it, right? Looking for available tools. Can I already forgot my second point. The data infrastructure is the juice inside of those specific PSA tools or other tools good enough? Again, I'm using notes and whatnot. You can think of this in every different way, right? Are the reports pullable? Is there editable stuff? You name it. Is the team willing? And last but not least, again, this is a CloudRadial bias because we always think of client. It's not always closed loop to the MSP. What about your clients? Do they like it? And remember that I have the benefit of working with you guys, and you guys are on the webinar right now about AI. So you're obviously at some capacity willing to talk and learn about it. Some people hate AI with a passion, and even the sheer mention of it immediately gets them to. So when you think about how you apply AI, again, I'll use a service bias here, and you were to put answers in front of people, right? Trying to mitigate, let's say, simple tickets or whatever, we've seen people be vehemently against it. So when you think about kind of early adopter clients, the best ones are to think of are the ones that are excited about tech. They're the ones that give you grace when things don't work properly. If you get a hallucination, you don't want people freaking out and saying that you're garbage, your tools are garbage. There are hair trigger clients. I know I've seen them and I've worked with plenty of them with MSPs that we're very cognizant of. So again, we're going to look at a system inside of Service AI and how we look at it. Again, super simple formula to determine whether someone is like a good candidate for AI deployment and experimentation versus somebody who needs complete perfect polish or maybe just never wants it because they just need that human being. So the reality is, again, deploying AI to difficult clients is a really great way to poison the well because one bad experience with a client is going to become AI doesn't work, it's not ready. And the danger of that is, and again, I'm not Mr. GPT, I'm not Sam Altman, I don't have any stock or stake in Claude or any AI stuff. Doesn't matter to me if it fails. But the reality is, it's looking like, at least at a certain level, it's here to stay. And the reality is that a lot of these systems, if you're behind it, right, and if you kind of lag behind, the more integrated people get with it, the harder it will be for you to crack into it. So this is the struggle of getting in on an emerging technology. You're going to have those hallucinations. You're going to have weird experiences. So getting those clients with the right grace that are okay with that, that understand that is critical. So at the end of the day, it varies. I hate that answer, but it's true. And the reality is, from a deployment standpoint, from an infrastructure, not all clients should get AI at the same time. I can repeat that as many times as I want. I just want to drill in your heads that you got to be strategic with it. Okay, so this one's a lot faster, and I want to get to some screen share stuff because PowerPoint's typically not my jam, but this one is a learning heavy session. So what are the common issues that are stopping AI success? And this is a really simple kind of four grid slide based on what I have seen in, I've done 35 right now implementations of our tool. So I've already done many hours. So this is already hundreds of plus hours of people figuring out what stops AI or where the biggest struggle points are. I'm sure there's more, but this is what I've seen thus far. So let's take a look at the big four. So number one is the chat first mistake. And I get this one, I really do. The chat first mistake implies that you want to basically put AI in front of people because it's cool and it sometimes gets stuff right and many times does not, but you're really hoping out for the fact that that sometimes is going to be most times, but it's not, right? So what that means is you don't necessarily want to put that mouthpiece spitting out answers with no brain or context or training behind it, because that's the number one way of getting frustrated clients, losing trust, and making AI the dirtiest, nastiest word among people. So basically, the idea that AI is plug and play, as far as I've seen, is total BS. It is not. It has a lot of cool potential, but without that training data and improvement or whatever, taking it to chat first, client first, uh, can be a big mistake, right? So obviously, I'm not just talking about CloudRadial, but basically every AI tool, especially in the MSP space, but in general, should have some mechanism for corrections or enhancements because that's what we see, right? AI needs to be told and taught. Let's go with this bottom one too. Set and forget error. What does that mean? It means that you treat AI like a software that you put out there and then it's just learning stuff. It is a learning system, and there are plenty of ways that it can automatically learn based off of, again, the infrastructure you've plugged it into. But the reality is, if you just stop feeding it, it stops getting smarter. It's literally like a person. If you stop teaching a person processes and improved methods and new things and how to, say something or improve documentation to go off of, AI is more than happy to spit out knowledge from I'll say 2005 or whatever super old knowledge you have. So it is honestly, it's an additional thing to kind of keep track of. It pays off, right? Because it can spit things out a lot faster. It never forgets because it has a literal base of knowledge it can get into, especially in an LLM context. But in general, it's not something that you just go, it runs. That's the truth of the situation. So you have to keep eyes on it, not every single moment of every day, but not you set it and forget it. The good enough plateau. Let's talk about this guy right here. So good enough plateau is something I'm super guilty of as an implementer because I'm used to implementing the CloudRadial portal. And good enough is literally what we aim for there. What good enough usually means in software is every piece of software has a level, 100, a 100% completion in it. Some of those are super easy to achieve, right? 100% completion is when you maximize the tool, you have full knowledge of it, you know every feature, you might use every feature. That's awesome. You're not doing that with Outlook. You're not doing that with PowerPoint. You're not doing that with CloudRadial's UCP. That's okay, right? So those tools, every single software that's more complicated has a good enough level, whether you know it or not. There's a software implementer like myself that knows there's a minimum level to keep you engaged. And then there's a maximum level that makes you a power user. Awesome if you hit it. We don't expect people to. The AI is tricky because good enough plateau is unknown for a lot of people. What do I mean by that? Good enough plateau is, say you put AI in front of your customers and you've been training it and it gets answers right 70% of the time. That's awesome. 70% is pretty awesome. Or is it? If I told you that 30% of the time you asked a question, I would lie to you. Not so great. So the good enough plateau is difficult with AI, and I don't honestly have an answer, but I do know that the specific number we want to reach for most people is about like 90+% accuracy. The way you achieve that is, again, ample training and honestly putting a correct runway in front of yourself, understanding that training and making sure that the AI spits the right stuff and you narrow the scope to answering questions about specific subjects or for specific clients well is the best way. So the good enough plateau, you don't want to just stop where it's okay. You want to stop when it actually transforms things. And again, we're going to look at tangible ways to measure where you're at with it. But it's not quite like other tools. And I'm talking about AI in general, where you can just kind of say that's okay. Because especially if it makes its way to end users, it takes one, maybe two bad experiences before people hand wave it. So there is a danger there that we have to be completely aware of. And the last one is the no immediate value trap. Basically meaning that when you first hook it up, I even made it sound like it just now, so I'm guilty. It feels like you're not going to get any value out of AI processes until it's perfect. So there's a healthy balance and also kind of opposite end of the spectrum of good enough and no immediate value. There is value in AI, especially when it relates to service stuff, but you have to understand that it grows and you have to focus on the different facets of it as it grows. If you just wait for it to be good enough and then really great or whatever, you might be waiting a whole bunch of time, not realizing that it's helping you in certain ways. So, a really tangible example of this is I'll use Service AI because that's what I know. When you hook up your ticket data, you're not getting the AI to spit perfect answers out. You're just not because you need to train it. But what you get immediate value out of is seeing where your gaps are. So you have something to work on. Then you work on those gaps and you test it, and then your responses get better. And then what? Well, now you're starting to also analyze trends of are things improving? Are CSAT scores improving? So you start focusing on that. So in this kind of great journey to get to an ideal deployment and total value, there's like little micro things to work on that are sub objectives that completing those basically gets you all the way. And that's going to be true of basically any AI implementation, regardless of the tool you use. To get to, we hooked up AI and it's doing its thing, is a lot of sub-objectives. So maybe you hook it up to a backup reporting tool and it starts reporting in stuff. It starts spitting it out. Awesome. It starts telling you when alerts are missed. It starts doing all of these things are individual kind of checklist items. And I'll talk about checklists in a second as well that are going to help you get that value along the journey. And that's super important too, so you don't give up. This is true of any software, but especially with AI when it can feel like you're not sure where the end point is. So these are the most common ones I've seen. Granted, I'm not some super wizard on AI. I've only been doing the AI, implementations for a few months, but I've done a lot of hours, and this is the ones that come up over and over again. So it's most likely that you're going to see these as an AI deployment in general. Now, this is the part where I show you some of how we approach it. And again, it's obviously CloudRadial stuff, but I want to focus. I always try to do this. I say this in almost every webinar I do. I want to focus on the methodology and not just CloudRadial proprietary stuff, because I think it's a good way for you to frame things. So how do you benchmark readiness in reality, right? I can sit up here and talk to you about drawing on napkins and thinking about your team or whatever, but like, is there a tangible way to say, are you ready? Are you not? So that's what I'm talking about with Service AI. If you've never seen, heard, or know what it is, I'll give you the super gist. It's basically a tool that takes a look at specifically the PSA data we imported in, and we just cross-reference the heck out of it to give you roughly three different scores and different ways to analyze the service desk efficiency. And we're talking about some scores that are kind of titled RPS, relative performance scores, that give you a gist of what's the quality of your ticket notes, how are your technicians doing, and then how are your end users, right? The people you support. What's their vibe? Are they doing well? Are they upset? Are they not upset? With those three scores comes a lot of baggage because there is documentation gap analysis. There is triaging of tickets to improve the note quality. There's a lot of stuff built into those three scores that kind of explodes in things to think about, and you should think about it. And we're gonna actually look at a live example. But in general, the model that we have, again, this is a good model to think about even when you look at other tools, is we have the central service AI tool, and what it's getting fed with is, again, your tickets and your documentation, your articles, and additional rules. So this is part of the training. What it spits out is it spits out insights, right? So again, it doesn't necessarily give you the full power of here's everything AI has answered every problem you've ever had, but it'll tell you what it can answer, what it can't answer, what it needs you to fix. It also allows you to do regression testing, which is a fancy developer way of saying testing what gaps you have. So this is functionally gap analysis and allowing you to test this thing before you put it in front of clients. So chat sandbox, giving you theoretical tech answers that they can then use now and immediately. And that links off to that eventual future of CloudRadial chat, right? So the idea with a tool like Service AI is it's like a prep tool. It's something that offers value immediately, but really it's something that you can build off of, you work with, and then it spits out some answers so that when you put a chat in front of a client, there is a net sum of intelligence behind that chat. There is context, there are rules. There's a lot more of a brain behind a mouthpiece, so that mouthpiece actually makes sense. So I'm going to flip over and look at it. Again, this is not a full-scale demo. I'm not here to sell Service AI. Well, actually, I am, but really, I'm here to talk about how it works and how it approaches a lot of the AI implementation. So tangibly, again, we're looking at the idea that we have data. We're saying that, according to Service AI, the quality of our notes could be better, right? A 6.9, I haven't done anything to improve the ticket notes, tells us that if somebody were to just say, turn on AI, it would miss quite a bit, right? It would miss almost 30% of the time because the quality of the notes is not ideal. Now, nobody in any of my implementations has ever hit like a 9 or a 10 because the reality is we're not built like that. Like MSP space has just not been conditioned to make sure it has the perfect notes and the perfect documentation. We're just now getting to that. And we're just now getting to the phase as an industry where we're assisting the creation of better notes and better documentation. So don't be alarmed, ashamed, or afraid if your scores aren't great, because that's the whole point of the tool. It's figuring out where you are, benchmarking, and how to improve it before it hits your clients, right? The agent scores, the technician scores, how are they doing? What's their empathy? Are they responding quickly? Are they asking the right questions? So this is a much more comprehensive and complex score than just did the technician answer yes or no? And then same thing with like sentiment analysis. So the gist here is that every single one of Service AI's kind of endpoints here is to look at tickets. I'm going to pick random ones. I wish I had prepped for this a little bit better, but we'll see. Looking at the individual unit, like a ticket, and basically looking at that ticket going, is this ticket automatable? Meaning, does the AI read the notes, understand the problem, understand the solution? Is the technician and the user and the technician happy with the exchange summaries and the ability to actually see those things back and forth? So seeing the thing where it's like there was a software update failure, Chris was answering, can you tell me the error, thanks for the message, yada yada, right? So the idea is that with this context, the AI can grab that note, it says it can do it, can it do it, and it's basically going to parrot that it understands the issue and knows how to actually respond back. And it's able to put this not just in this sandbox, which is what we're looking at now, but also inside the context of like a PSA, right? So to be able to spit out the answers to show you that, like, hey, I know that the issue, I could have done this before, right? You can get in here and marvel at your notes being good and that the AI answers it. Or if the notes were not good, and let's say, again, this is where I mentioned the senior technicians are really helpful because you can see that a senior technician could be able to eyeball this and go, well, that's crap. That's totally wrong. A junior technician might take this as gospel because it looks pretty legit. So the ability for a tool, especially Service AI, especially for the purpose of evaluation, is not just to test AI responses, it's to understand how to improve. So if it's a partially useful response and it just needs some correction, simply putting better notes in your PSA is going to train the AI without you specifically having to tell it what to do. If there's a huge delta, right, a huge gap between what the AI understands and what the problem actually was, that's your signal that you've got documentation or process gaps that need to be backfilled. A tool like Service AI and a lot of AI tools, they supplement information with web search. We do the same, right? The idea being that if you don't have any tickets about, I don't know, Adobe PDF Reader having issues and you don't have any documentation, because why would you? It's publicly available. It can search that. But again, the niche stuff, you may not be able to. So if I say this was not good, and this is a poor example because it's just my financial software, I can always generate an article. I can specify the financial software rather than this. So we can just say, I don't know, let's say QuickBooks, right? And then I'm going to update QuickBooks here. QuickBooks. So now what the AI is looking for is it's trying to get the net sum of knowledge and saying, okay, let's create a detailed article, let's reference stuff, let's not include ticket number or whatever. I'm not here to explain prompting to you guys. The idea, though, is just to say, can we enrich the AI and use this as a training tool? So the bigger point here is that we've identified that there is a gap. We've identified that there are ways to improve it. And the tool is going to do its thing and kind of respond back. Now, in this case, it's going to come back and give us some troubleshooting steps. And what it's really doing is it's teaching itself. It's learning for itself with options for you to correct it, right? So if I were to come in here and fix the notes or tell it to prioritize one fix over another, it's going to then use that as its next answer. It's going to then use that to train other technicians. So the ability to quick add the documentation is not always perfect, right? The AI is going to do its best, but that's why I'm saying a lot of these tools, especially that first pass AI deployment, really depends on more senior level people. I know the instinct is there's a new tool. I want my new guys to get really into it. But the reality is, like, is a new person going to be able to spot whether this is junk or is somebody who knows QuickBooks and can kind of cross correlate going to be better suited? It takes more time. I know that. I've seen it to be able to sit down, correct it, and go, yep, that's good, or nope, that's not the best. But doing it pays off really, really well. So you've got this kind of improvement process where you can see how the AI answers based off of your notes, right? This is sheerly off of how you're operating. You have the options to improve it. You've got the ability then to holistically look at how things are going. So when I look at the data, this is part of that insights bit. It's not just about spitting out answers. It's how have my answers been? So in this case, this is abysmal, but on the 307 chats that we've tested with it, it solved about 18% very confidently. 80.5% of them it's thought it did a pretty good job. And then 1% of them it said not so great, right? So this is actually not terrible. I said abysmal, but reality is like it could use a little nudging. But this is a literal, tangible way to understand where we're at. And using these kind of benchmark markers give us a platform to train the AI and understand how things are actually going well before we put it in front of people. And again, we're not doing a full demo, but the nuances of this are pretty staggering, right? Because then you get into all of the what ifs. So you've trained the AI, it's got notes or whatever. What if you need a specific override for a company? What if Premier Dental needs specific documentation? That's another super big point, right? A lot of MSPs put specific documentation for their companies they support in their documentation systems. IT Glue is super popular. So the ability to get that in there and use contextual documentation. So if there's articles that speak to Premier Dental's, I don't know, dental systems and how to support and manage those, they would be used when I actually try a chat, right? So referencing the appropriate documentation, passing on the knowledge in a siloed way that it doesn't leak to everybody, right? We want the appropriate documents and tickets being referenced for the appropriate customer with the end goal of really being, again, making sure that the clients get the best experience and the techs are empowered. It's a super huge way of coming back to, I'm going to go re-reference my PowerPoint, right? Back to the future. No, this one, right? When you look at this and you go, how did that all tie in? Why did I go for a service AI demo? Evaluation of the tech stack. Again, the PSA is a prime part for you to start. The gaps are always worth addressing that we talked about. The practical tools to benchmark are not always that straightforward. Obviously, that's why we built the tool. We saw the need for MSPs to want to benchmark their AI readiness in the service desk. But this isn't just a service desk webinar, is it? Right? It's about a bunch of different tools. So when you look at different ways to benchmark it, be thinking about the same methodology in everything. Before you get into AI, just going, AI does stuff. How do you measure it? Did it make a process faster? Did it slow you down? Is it making future processes slower for then hopefully making them faster? That's what we're seeing, right? So being able to take a tool and honestly look at whether it's going to benchmark properly, if you're going to be able to look at historical data, should be some of your key requirements when you look at AI as an infrastructure enhancer, not just going, we have AI. And this is the difference between integrating it as a system versus just going, here's a tool that does an AI function and ta-da. My take is that those are going to be gone. Those gimmick tools that do a one-shot, thing, they're not going to be around for so long because other tools that are more thoughtful will probably just cannibalize them. This is going to be a big thing we predict, like in the product space. And this is honestly shout out to product director Dave Falkenberg for putting it in my mind, and it's honestly part of his research stuff. Just to understand that like the 2026 year of client value, we're going to see a real tightening of AI tools that have that workflow. So we're seeing a lot of explosion of AI tools that do the one-off thing right now, where they say, I do this thing really well. Um, and that's what I do. But like I just showed you, if you don't have a practical tool that kind of ties it all together, it's not really going to be super efficient then, is it? And you're going to end up managing, you already manage a bunch of tools. Managing another 10, 20, 30 single-use AI tools is not in the cards for anybody. So when you evaluate tools, when you think about it, and I know plenty of MSPs that have built their own tools, which is fantastic, be thinking about the fact that benchmarkability is super huge, growth potential, multiple uses, right? Obviously, I'm here tooting my own horn because I work for the CloudRadial company here, but that's why we didn't build a tool that just says we retitle your notes or we check the score. It has to kind of give that bigger picture and bolt on in a way that also matters and is natural to the way you work. That's another huge thing that we've learned from, well, basically every tool, but especially from the client portal. For an MSP, for your team to adopt AI, it has to plug into your current processes, at least to some degree. If it's too far out there and it requires a brand new system, it's just that much harder. So the sweet spot is, can it plug into your stuff? Does it have an easy path to get in and a lot of growth potential? If it kind of fits those three things, you have stuff to work with. I'm going to plug in the last bit, which is the strategic foundations for effective AI implementations. That sounds so collegiate, but the reality is, I just wanted to show a cool blue dude. Look at that. The marketing team worked really hard on that cool blue dude. I just wanted to put him out there. I'll talk about the cool blue dude. So the cool blue dude is kind of a metaphor for what we've done, but it's a case in point. Again, you could look at this as me trying to sell you stuff, or really, I hope you kind of take this as a bigger picture. If you're looking at AI as a system integrator and you're looking at something that is an accelerator, that's how you should be looking at it. So ask the question, what can this do between the tools? Where are its limits? How does it work? Etc. I'll plug this in a second, but there's a companion book we wrote with this that's talking about the service delivery roadmap. And I'll plug this as well. I believe him. I haven't checked the comments, and I'm sure Crystal has dropped it. That kind of talks about the more nitty-gritty of what does that specific analysis, deployment, maturity, how do you benchmark it, yada, 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 so on and so forth, which is also where I got Cool Blue Dude. Really a big fan. Great job, guys. But in general, where that brings me to, I'll do a more boring but easier to read example. I'll show you how we data modeled it just to give you some color. So for us, to do AI wasn't just like we have to do AI because AI is the big thing. It kind of is, and software companies are kind of shackled to that. But the reality is, if you're going to do AI, we just saw service AI, you kind of have to tie it into your story. And this applies to MSPs just as much as it does to vendors of software. So we have service AI and it plugs into stuff, but then how does that feed and make something else more intelligent? And how does that intelligence then get used? So the gist is we have this kind of triangle of stuff. So service AI being the aggregator, the sorter, the insight gatherer, the what to do next on the internal side ties into the client portal. How? The client portal is where the clients log in. So for us, it's another source for the AI to reference and understand which user has access to what tool to turn service delivery not just into problems and here's the response and how to fix stuff, but also here's a report or here's an assessment we ran or here's this. So opening up the content to more than just tickets. And then again, having a mouthpiece to actually speak to that is using a conversational interface to access that brain, to reach out and touch the interface stuff. So you could look at this as a way to say, hey, we have these three different models that tie together. But the real way I want you to take it away is that even when we thought about it, we knew it wasn't enough to just do AI. Because what does that even mean? Do AI in helping you determine where a ticket goes as a triage is a cool feature. It's not a product, and it certainly isn't a system. So that's one feature of one product, and this is the system, right? The system is you have used AI as an accelerator, as something that binds together. So that first example that I gave 50 minutes ago about tying in and really understanding your core platforms, what's open and available, even if you're doing it right now, even if you're well into an AI deployment, just stop and ask yourself, what's the point? What are we actually trying to do? You're totally going to get value out of a tool that does one back and forth connection. But the way you multiply it is if you can start to really tie a thread between all these different systems. That's what we're trying to do with our tools internally. But that's the same challenge I pose to you, right? As you look at AI deployments, try to figure out what your actual big level scope is. So the gist is, you can't really skip the steps. And I know we want to just get to plug it in, plug it in, plug it in, but that's going to create a lot of noise and we don't want that. So skipping these different phases doesn't really save you time. It's just going to make a lot of more management. You're going to have, ways to do it that might be wrong. You're going to have to go back, find different AI tools that plug in. So just be cognizant of what you're building, what you're trying to look for, and what your systems that you out and get, what they plug into, what they plan to plug into. So you understand where kind of things overlap. Uh, Totally off the record, but I've seen this happen. It happens to us in the MSP space. It happens all over the place. You're seeing these Venn diagrams of bubbles kind of bumping into each other. What do I mean by that? Teams is using Copilot. I have a Fathom AI assistant that takes my notes that does the same thing. And then I have ChatGPT and then I have Claude. I have AI overload. And the reality is that, like, yes, these tools all overlap. And I suspect from what I've seen from people that the winners are going to be the ones that have the long game multi-touch strategy, not just the ones that are in one space. So same way to approach it, right? Really map out your journey, really try to figure out your use case and figure out what tools get to that way. Again, shameless plug, but Service AI was literally designed to do that for the service desks for the different PSAs to try to give that holistic power, giving you that journey from analyzing where you are, figuring out how to improve it, all the way down to figuring out how to deploy it to clients, and then all the different ways to do that. You've heard me speak a lot. Why not read a lot? So I also wanted to point this out. So like I said, that guide is really the thing we want people to take a look at, mostly because I think it's a good starting point. This isn't a call to action in this webinar to get a demo or anything else. Obviously, feel free if you want to. But the reality is, like, we're inviting people, MSPs, to be critical, to think critically, to help us. This isn't so much a vendor getting up here and saying this is the coolest technology ever. This is just what we're seeing, and we're kind of in it together, especially MSPs and clients, uh, because a lot of clients, I'm talking about your clients, are asking MSPs, I get this a lot, what are you doing with AI? How is it working? What are they doing with AI? And people don't really know. So it's unfortunately not as easy as please buy my stuff. It works. It's really a here's what we're seeing. What are you seeing? How are we going to do this together? How can vendors build tools that really assist that journey for you? And what ways do you see it having the most value? What ways do you see it having no value? This is the cool part about being a product person, and same thing with MSPs is you totally get to say this sucks or this rocks, and it matters more now than it ever does because these things are not baked. These things are still getting developed. Um, but in general, this stuff that we've covered on this call or that I've yapped about for so long is the stuff that I've kind of seen come up repeatedly over and over again with a pretty decent sample size. So hopefully that gives you a pretty decent idea of where to start with AI, what to look out for, and in general, where to begin an implementation. Oof, where am I at, Crystal? 55 minutes. That's pretty good. I don't know if I have anything to say for opening up of questions because this is more of just a here's what we've learned. But I will ask you, Crystal, is there anything you want me to address or look at before I shut us down for the day?
I think there are a couple questions, but if you want to take a look and see if that's something you can answer, and if we don't have time for them, I will make sure that we try to get them answered in the email.
Let's take a gander. Sometimes I have these conversations. People are like, well, talk to me about LLM data structure. I'm like, oh, wait, no, I don't know that. Let's see. John Morris, what are you doing here? The V2 API is actually out. We have documentation for it, not related to the service AI stuff or AI in general, but I guess it's a good point. It's talking about the UCP thing, which is how do we get service AI or really any AI tool to spit answers, to grab answers, whatever. CloudRadial as a product family is no different, right? Can it support that ingestion and whatever? The answer is yes. Let me show what I'm talking about. If you've not seen it, I want to say it's developers.cloudradial.com. There we go. So if you go to developers.cloudradial.com, uh, I'm sure we can get this flipped, but if you don't know, there's a spot up here for beta. You want to go to V2, and the V2 has dramatically different reference guides. So you can see a lot of people have asked me what John's asking because they come here and they see this and they're like, oh, there's like 5 things we can pull and push from Cloud Radial. But on the V2, there are far more, right? So you can see that we have endpoints and feedback and assessments and catalogs and domains and you name it, which is very important if you plan on doing any kind of AI-able automation. It applies to our tool as well, in and out of it. So good question. Does exist. Let's see. The other one's a kind of a long one, so let me silently read this before I look at. Okay. So John's asking a super important question. So we get this a lot. We had this design philosophy question happen. So client-facing notes, when it comes to, again, feel free to interpret this as well in your own exploration of how service tools do it. So when you look at a service response, right? When we look at an actual ticket, what service AI does, I'm not saying it has to, but this is what it does do, is it looks at a specific ticket. So I'll pick another random one. Harbor Point email attachment issues. What's going on with it? So Melissa says this, service insights, blah, blah, blah. This is all fake, by the way. These are all generated by AI itself. So the irony is palpable. What John's asking for is like, okay, so in a typical environment or deployment, you look at Service AI and it's pulling the public facing notes. And that's what the AI is learning from, which on one hand, you go, yeah, that makes sense because why do we do it that way? Well, this is what the client would see. If a client were to audit you and go, show me that ticket, this is what they see, right? This is what they see in the portal. If you gave them access or use a third party portal or whatever it may be to let them see it, they're going to see the external stuff. So looking at this, why is the AI looking at that? Well, again, the AI is, especially in this context, judging that ticket based off of the client's eyes. So when the client looks at this and sees this, this is exactly what they know. But the flip side to that is basically every MSP I've worked with has a slew of internal notes that may detail the exact fix. So this is not a super awesome ticket because, like I said, it's AI designed. But you can see that in general, it's like Melissa just generically said she has email attachment issues. Tevin doesn't really give us too much, right? Pending updates, sometimes bugs, who knows? Thanks for the update. There might be an issue with permissions or settings. Now, in a real life ticket, maybe Tevin put in a mountain of internal notes saying everything he did and what he did and how he troubleshot that and everything else. But it doesn't see that, right? Which means that the AI then goes, yeah, you did so-so, put in so-so notes. Why? Well, again, that's not what made it out to the client. But then you have this awkward point where you go, I want to judge the thread and the conversation and the client notes and the user based off what's public, but I want the AI to ingest the intelligence of the private. So how do I balance those two worlds? We're doing that now. We're trying to do that now. And I'll show you a really simple example of it. So let's go to a generic sandbox here. And I say a very, very awesome ticket. I have printer issues. Now we know on the MSP side that means nothing. So the AI is going to come back and, like I told you, it's designed to have to give you an answer, whether it knows what it's talking about or not. Has no idea what printer, what the issue is. So it's going to just give us not slop, but generic. You'll see that happen in a second. And this is going to be pulling from, again, some knowledge of public notes, of documentation, whatever it may be. So you're seeing it even takes a while because it's just such a broad question. Now it just goes like, hey, here's some troubleshooting stuff, and maybe go look at paper jams and whatever. Again, it has no idea. Now, switching this is what we're playing with. This is to answer John's question. Switching the context to agent based is what we're working on. So having different responses. One of them is how do you answer it for the end user? And the other one is how do you answer it as if you were a technician or if the bot is now speaking to the technician? And what it's going to do is it basically looks at it in a different way. It says, I don't have enough context to answer that. So here is what I would ask you to further get me that stuff. Why this is important is not only does this change the context and make Service AI more usable across a different facet, right? So it's not just if I have an answer, paste it. It's also like, I don't have an answer. So instead of just saying try resetting, it goes, what's the problem? Have you tried it? What's the make and model? Is there a Wi-Fi or whatever? That's going to help it give better answers. The reason I bring this up in the internal note conversation is because we're currently working on getting internal notes to be piped in for agent answers. So it's not going to affect the scores of the technicians, but it's going to dramatically improve the intelligence of the AI because we're going to make it ingest agent internal notes on this path. So we don't necessarily want MSPs to have to change the way they do things and start putting in mountains of notes in the public because the end users might not care about that. It could be still a good way. I mean, I've certainly seen a lot of tickets come in that are just bad, that they just say we fixed the issue and the client just goes, oh, cool, I guess. But there are cases where, say, you fixed a very difficult network configuration issue and a client does not care. That's super awesome for AI, not great for client capability. So that's why we're building kind of the split system that ingests stuff in different ways. So hopefully that gets you a better logic. We're working on that one, so it's not available yet, but we already have the mechanisms. We're trying to build in the plumbing, if that makes sense. I recommend, by the way, again, this was a general service AI stuff with my specific call to action being please go download that book and take a look and see what you think and go see the cool blue guy. But there's that blue guy. But if you want a demo of service AI and you want to kind of talk through the stuff, again, ask the questions, see where the endpoints are, see where the failure points are, see where it is today, where it might go tomorrow. That's a good use case for just cloudradial.com/demo. You can get a demo of service AI specifically. I know I'm already over on my webinar time and I don't see any other tickets. So I think I will bid everybody adieu. And I want to say thank you for joining us. This is a very talk heavy webinar, I know, but hopefully you learned something or at least got a nice framing of how to approach AI, at least in the service desk capability. Thank you guys so much, and I will catch you for the next one. Bye.